The weather actually looks really nice today. Probably a good time to film some, I guess, water scenes if I can find one around here. And what did I read today? More news about war and stuff? Yep, that's what it seems like. And again, more people using drones as weapons per se. How about this one here? It says, Iranian combat drone crashes into restaurant in Jordan's capital. I guess they're still fighting it full-fledged. It says an Iranian Shahed 101 combat drone crashed into a building in the Uthaina area of Jordan's capital, Amman, on Monday. British General Mustafa Hariri, a spokesperson for the Jordanian army, said the drone had an explosive warhead but did not detonate on impact when it hit the patio of a restaurant in Uthaina. Wow, that's really lucky, I guess, for those people. It says there were no injuries and military engineers dismantled the device. Recently, 2 drones struck residential buildings in Abu Sir and Iraq, he said, and 27 intact drones with explosive halos crashed in uninhabited parts of the country. The 2 countries have continued to exchange attacks since then, and the situation escalated on Sunday when the US carried out airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. And with that in mind, apparently Iran did retaliate against the US as they attacked one of their bases. But the interesting thing was, it wasn't in the US. They attacked a base in Qatar, and because of that, I guess technically Qatar is kind of expressing they can actually defend themselves against Iran now. Like, wow, but even more people are getting involved. It says here, Iran claims attack on US base in Doha. Qatar says missiles intercepted. Iran has claimed responsibility for the missile attacks Monday on US military bases in Doha, retaliating for the American bombing of its nuclear sites and escalating tensions in the volatile region. So again, there's so many interesting dynamics to this, because some people are arguing with the US's strike, they basically attacked, just for example, that nuclear site where they wanted to get rid of all the materials per se. They didn't actually harm anyone in general. So the argument here is people are saying, well, it's the same thing. They just kind of attacked a US base. But in this case, we can't really say that, because they literally went into another country's area firing like missiles and so forth. But as they said, they actually intercepted it. And the other interesting thing was, you can see, although there were a lot of stuff online of, let's just say, people in Qatar condemning it and so forth, apparently from what was said, they were given a lot of head notice that they would be attacking those US bases. For example, this one here, it said Iran gave a 12-hour heads up before launching its missile attack on US bases stationed in Qatar. No casualties are expected. The strike involved 6 missiles aimed at symbolic targets, signaling a response without any expectation of matching the scale of damage Iran suffered over the weekend. And with that said, maybe there will be peace in the world, because this was announced by the US president, where apparently Israel and Iran agreed to have a ceasefire of sort. This one here in the post, it says, congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called, quote, the 12-day war. So this is crazy if it's true anyways, and not some kind of setup where they say, yeah, we have peace just to, for example, do a surprise attack. Well, I guess we'll see, huh? This will be kind of good, I guess, in general, if everything ends. And well, that actually, in terms of just war in general, and then using, for example, things like drones in the previous story, apparently Taiwan wants to get serious in terms of making more drones. You would think, for example, with all the stuff that they have in terms of building things like processors and so forth, they would actually be a leader in the space. So why not? This one here says, Taiwan is rushing to make its own drones before it's too late. Unmanned vehicles are increasingly becoming essential weapons of war, but with a potential conflict with China looming large, Taiwan is scrambling to build a domestic drone industry from scratch. That's another conflict that may actually potentially happen in the near future anyways. And it says here how Taiwan had a target before producing about 180,000 drones per year by 2028, but it doesn't seem like they're going to be reaching that goal, because they only produced 10,000, it says, over the last year. Now, why can't they actually do this? And there's a section here For example, where, as you know, DJI is the biggest drone manufacturer, especially for things like consumer drones, where you could argue a lot of people are using their drones for military purposes too. So why can't they compete with them? It says competing with DJI. We are not able to compete with DJI, Fang says, referring to the massive Chinese drone manufacturer. Other countries have scaled up their drone programs recently, have accepted Chinese technology in their supply chain either as an asset or a necessary evil. But Taiwan, for obvious reasons, is leery of including any Chinese tech. That makes drone manufacturing hard. China maintains a massive advantage in producing certain critical pieces of these UAVs, including the gimbals, optical sensors, and antennas. To buy that equipment, Taiwan needs to find an allied suppliers, often at considerable costs. Taiwan has even had difficulty leveraging its advantages. The country has an advanced battery industry, for example, but it's heavily reliant on Chinese critical minerals. Taiwanese drone makers are buying chips from Qualcomm and Nvidia, but those chips are not specifically for drones, she says. Those are communication chips, sensor chips, and those are for more general use. And even those general chips are significantly more expensive than their Chinese counterparts, sometimes by a factor of 10. We definitely have the ability to make them, but the reason why these companies are not involved in this market is because the scale is just too small. It's a catch-22. Taiwanese companies can't increase production and reduce costs until they get more orders, but they can't get more orders because their costs are too high. Now, that's one of those things where businesses often say if they could scale, then they could start pumping stuff out, for example. It makes you wonder here, do they actually have a chance? Let's just say if they were getting into the consumer drone industry. I wouldn't doubt, for example, it would be way more expensive, but at the same time, I would argue drones in general, they're still very niche. And for a lot of people that buy them, they're more in a pro-consumer mindset. So in that case, a lot of people are looking for more, let's just say, quality and reliance. If you can make something, for example, that's way better, a lot of people are actually willing to pay the premium price, in my opinion, unless you're telling me it's ridiculous where someone could buy a drone that's, let's just say, I don't know, $500, and then you making the exact same thing would cost someone $3,000, then that makes absolutely no sense. But again, if they made something that was superior in almost every single way, for example, again, I'm talking about, let's just say, more of a consumer drone, way better flight time, superior camera quality and all that, I think a lot of people, again, would actually pay the premium per se. I mean, there's no difference, in my opinion, than, let's just say, some of those electric cars and all that. I mean, they're not very cheap, and usually the ones that are the better ones, and especially the people that are going to buy those products, would be inclined to pay more for the better quality item in general. So I would think, with that in mind, I don't think it's that far-fetched in general. I mean, this kind of reminds me of how even big companies nowadays, they do crowdfunding, for example, for product launches. They just advertise it just as they would, like a big company, just to get pre-orders to guarantee some financial stability to be able to produce it. I wouldn't doubt you could do the same thing, actually, again, assuming they were targeting consumer drones or whatever to develop that base first. Alright, see you guys later.